This week, as we've been talking about miracles, and remember, every miracle begins with a problem, part of what I'm also trying to show you is some parallels between stories in the Hebrew Bible and what we see in the ministry of Jesus. So today I want to share a healing story that's found in 2 Kings chapter 5 with the prophet Elisha, S-H-A, not Elijah, Elisha, and his interaction with a man named Naaman, who was the commander of the army of the king of Aram, of what we would now call Syria. And our verse is chapter 5, verse 1. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. It's interesting right off the bat to me that his character and competence of Naaman are without question, right? Here he is a great man. He's in high favor. He's a victorious general. So all of those measures are very positive and very strong. But he suffered from leprosy, and that visible characteristic in some ways seems to be more important than his character and his competence. I mean, right off the bat, there's something there about how we need to make sure we look at people in categories that really matter and not just superficial ones or ones that simply aren't as important. But you have this wonderful story unfold with Naaman of how the Arameans are on one of their raids. They had taken a young girl, and she says basically, "Oh, it's too bad that my Lord can't get to the prophet who is in Samaria, because he would cure him of his leprosy." And you've got to read this whole story. It's in 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 19. But basically, Naaman does what it as a general would do, and he takes tons of money, 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, 10 sets of garments. He brings all this stuff to the king of Israel to basically, as a gift and as a bribe, to say, "Hey, look, I'm coming in peace. I just want to see this prophet who's got the chance to heal me." And when the king of Israel hears his request, he tears his garments and his clothes, and he said, "Am I God to give death or life that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? He's trying to pick a fight with me." So the king of Israel thinks that this is all a ploy to provoke a war, to provoke a battle. But Elisha, the man of God, heard about this, and he says, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman comes with his horses, his chariots, and he comes to Elijah's house. Now think of, how does a 5-star general expect to be treated by common folk, right? They expect a lot of respect and deference and everything else. Elijah doesn't even come out of his house, and he just sends a messenger and says, "Go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean." Well, how do you think the general responds to that? He's angry. He's like, "Nobody treats me this way." And thankfully his servants would say, "Look, Father, if the prophet had told you to do something really difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said was, 'Wash and be clean'?" And Naaman goes according to the word of the Lord, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Now, part of why this story is so remarkable, and sorry, I know I'm going a little longer today, is this is a story that Jesus mentions in the synagogue in his programmatic sermon in Luke chapter 4, verses 16 and 30, where he opens the scroll to the prophet Isaiah and says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has appointed me to bring good news to the poor, and release to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind." And the people in the synagogue, some of them get indignant and basically say, "Who are you to say all this?" And Jesus then tells them 2 Bible stories. He says, in the days of Elijah the prophet, there were a lot of widows who were going hungry when there was that drought and famine for 3.5 years. And who received the blessing of God? It wasn't a Jewish woman, it was a widow in Zarephath in Sidon. And there were a lot of lepers in the time of Elisha the prophet. And who was it received the healing of God? Naaman, a Syrian general. And if you look in your Bible in Luke chapter 4, what was the result of Jesus telling his fellow Jews these two stories from their own book about how God blessed people who weren't Jewish? The next line is basically, kill preacher. And it says they took him out and they led him to the brow of a hill to throw him off. But he turned and he walked past through them and went on his way. So part of why I shared these two stories this week is because they're stories Jesus related in his opening sermon in his own synagogue. And then, as we'll see, he goes on to heal those who are on the point of death, just like Elijah. And he will heal people of leprosy, as I'll tell you about tomorrow.